So, you probably saw the title of this video. This video is for like people of color that are like maybe like a nerd or alt or emo goth or whatever, and they may not feel connected with their culture. This video is my experience with that, and maybe like how you could be more connected with your culture, even if it feels like sometimes you're not really connected. But I might get a bit personal, but nothing too personal. With my journey with that. This video might not be that long, but yeah, here we go. So, growing up, I've always been like a little bit of an outcast, and like everywhere I've been at, for the most part. Whenever, like when I was younger, I would remember just like being very to myself, and trying to, understand the world around me when I was younger. Always in my imagination trying to think about the next time I was going to play, or the next time I was going to do this, or whatever I was going to watch this show, you know what I mean? And I noticed when my brothers would play like these very imaginative games and stuff like that. I guess that gave me like a very understanding and a very like passion of like storytelling, role playing and stuff like that, games with a story. We made like our own little TV series, or if you want to say a cartoon series, or just little games that we made up, and with crazy stories. It's crazy how many stories we made back then, and I think it was to also cope away from the world around us, And whenever I was like around in middle school, I discovered. I didn't discover. I revisited Fall Out Boy because I remember when I was younger, the song "Light 'Em Up" got really popular, and I was like, "Oh, I really like that song, so let me look for it again," and so on, and then look more into this band. And to be honest with you, I think the distortion, the very heavy guitars, what I thought was very heavy at the time, and so on, was it spoke to me in a different way because of how angry it sounded, and I think maybe I was had a bit of like anger against the world and so on. Although maybe at the time I didn't understand what it meant to be emo or punk. I would identify myself as emo and all that stuff, but I feel like at the time I really didn't understand what that truly meant, and how this goes into my Latino culture. I'm a Chicano. I'm pretty sure third generation, and I never really knew how to speak Spanish. So whatever my grandpa and my grandma would talk to me, I wouldn't really understand them but my other grandma and grandpa, they spoke English pretty often and stuff, so that was pretty okay. I remember listening to like a lot of Mexican music growing up. It wasn't like I didn't like it or anything, but even then I still felt very distant because like, oh, my grandma partying, this, and maybe the stuff I watched like about Mexican culture at the time, David Lopez, Rudy Marciano, and some other like YouTubers that were very to the stereotypes of being Mexican and whatnot, or Chicano, but not really getting into depth what it actually means to be a Chicano or a Mexican American and all that kind of stuff. And whenever I would watch movies and stuff like that, I would kind of tell what that is. I wouldn't really pay attention because I was like a kid, and my comprehension skills were pretty bad. I was pretty not that smart at the time. I was pretty slow, if I'm being really honest with you. I was really slow. So that was a thing that happened at one point. And I would think like, yeah, this is what it means to be Mexican, partying to 3 a.m., drinking beers, eating mazapan, conchas, and mi burrito sabanero, and all that kind of stuff, around Christmas time, and just, all the stereotypical stuff. I thought that was what it is because, I felt like I related to it in some way, but the thing is, that's not really what it means to be Mexican, to be honest with you, you know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of, like, Latinos, since we live in a world that's, like, very anti-color, because we live in a world that's, like, very white-centered, we feel like that's what it means to be whatever, maybe, like Puerto Rican, Black, or Asian, or whatever, like, we think that our stereotypes is what it is, or, even if some stereotypes may be a quote-unquote accurate, it's like, that's not all it really is. So at that time I really thought that's what it was. And like I said, I really didn't know what it meant to be emo and all that. And when I got into, I want to say around junior year of high school, something like a certain event happened that I got really into indie music and how that spoke to me on a different level. And I had like this little indie persona and all that. And it made me realize, like, how political the world is. I watched like a lot of political debate me bros and all that, but I realized that maybe that isn't what it truly is. And I remember watching Hassan Piker. I know, yeah, I may have opinions about Hassan Piker, but it was pretty important for my development as a person. And around that time, I've truly figured out what it meant to be emo, punk, and all that kind of stuff. Being very open-minded, try to be more left-leaning and so on, because I became like very left-leaning at this time. Try to be more open and so on, and seeing like the problematic things of my culture and so on, right? But I feel like that kind of made me not anti-Mexican or whatever, but like it made me like I guess not appreciate it as much as I should have, because like I was like, oh yeah, these problems, but looking into it, if like those problems that maybe you might associate with your culture, maybe you have this idea that all the men cheat and all this baby daddy culture, or like abusive dads, or just like misogyny, homophobia and all that. But the thing is, it's very common in every single culture, and I'm not saying that's okay, and that should be a drive for you to try to change that within your culture. I realized that as a Chicano, growing up, I grew up around a very Catholic household and all this kind of stuff, and it was very right wing and so on. And whenever my problems, issues I cared about, labor's rights, LGBTQ rights, freedom of religion, and so on and so forth, right? Whatever you think is left-leaning, I started to care about it more often. Indigenous rights, right? I honestly didn't really know I was indigenous until like 10th grade, but even then I wasn't in detail. And even now, I don't really know like what tribe I come from or anything like that. I'm gonna have to, figure that out. Anyways, so back to that, I found out about Rage Against the Machine, and vocalist Zach De La Rocha is a Chicano, and how he cared about so much of the issues I cared about. It kind of resonated with me heavy. And I realized, being Chicano isn't about staying up to 3 a.m., partying and so on, all these conservative ideas and, so on and so forth. I could take what it meant to be Chicano for him and make it into my own thing. The history of Chicanoness, what our people went through, how we collabed with other minority groups to have the rights that we had, and so on and so forth, and the indigenous rights, how the indigenous people are being being treated and all that. And it was actually great to see that kind of representation, because there wasn't that much representation, that kind of representation for a Chicano in most media. There's Dib, there's the Hispanic kid with a hoodie, you know what I mean? And the ethnically ambiguous, and Miguel, but Miguel was a little something different. He wasn't a Chicano. And it was awesome to see that kind of representation. And then it made me want to look more into Chicano history, and I started to look more into Chicano history, how much community organizing that it takes to make certain things happen. Black history, because honestly, I don't know, there's a lot of like racism between like a lot of minority groups and black people, but to be honest with you, without African Americans, a lot of us wouldn't be able to have the rights that we have today, and so on and so forth. So really, there's like a lot of credit to be there too. And the unison there was during the civil rights movement, even if y'all want to say it's like, oh my, it was purely like transactional, which I wouldn't say it was. It's still better than not. You know what I mean? And we live in a world that's like very white appealing. So, maybe there's some things inside of myself that maybe is more like white centric, whatever you want to say. or whites that supports white supremacy, but I've definitely been trying to do more to be against it. I've been reading more into my history. I've been trying to teach my siblings Spanish and trying to teach myself Spanish. I've been trying to learn Spanish, and I'm gonna, whenever the time comes, whenever I get good enough, I'll talk to my grandparents more, trying to figure out what tribe I'm from. So I guess my advice is if you're a Chicano or alt or emo person and all that, I feel like you should really look into the history of alt, emo, goth, so on and so forth culture, and then your Chicano, black, Puerto Rican, whatever history too, indigenous history, and then look into like the mixture of the two, the punk history, like the Chicano punk history. I've looked more into that and so on. And yeah, that's really my advice. Look up like the civil rights movement, how your culture played a role into it, and how diverse it was, because I found out that there was like a lot of queer movements, there was a lot of labor's movements and so on. You know what I mean? And community work it takes. And I joined a band. It's like a rock band, and although we haven't been able to do much, I do have a goal. I live in a place where there isn't much of a music scene. I would like to make more of a music scene. So it's like, and the Trump presidency also inspired me to do that. So I don't know, I feel like if I could make more of a music presence, there would be more of a domino effect. So like art, community, more food, like donations and so on and so forth, more community organizing if I could get this event done. And I'm just gonna put my Cash App here if anybody wants to support that kind of goal. I do just for now. I do want to make this show happen, and if you guys would like to donate, here is my Cash App. But yeah, if any people of color that are all emo, nerdy, and all that, just read or maybe watch documentaries if you're not a good reader, or watch YouTube videos, video essays. All the 900, right? All the 300 yards, or whatever the phrase is. Definitely look into your history, because I feel like that will give you so much connection with your culture that you never felt in a way that you have before. And knowledge is power. So yeah, hopefully I was pretty coherent here. I really hope that my message was out there and that I wasn't really all over the place. Y'all have a good day, and thanks for watching.